And that is Josineta Siengo from KPMG. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much for having us.
Karibu sana. And Seraphine from Ernst & Young. Seraphine Anamanja, karibu sana.
Thank you, Julian.
But before that, KRA yesterday put out the 2023-24 revenue outturn numbers indicating it mobilized 2.407 trillion shillings in total collection. That was a 95% performance rate based on the revised revenue target. And of course, on a year-on-year basis, that was up 11.1%. I want to start from that point. And Josineta, when you look at the numbers put out by KRA for FY 23-24, what's your feeling around the performance of the Revenue Authority in terms of collections?
Okay, thank you, Julian. I would say that given the current prevailing economic situation in the country, the Revenue Authority actually did try. But the question I would have on the table is, how are the numbers looking in terms of the needs for the country in terms of revenue? Again, with the current of measures that we are putting in place, how are these numbers looking like? Are we mobilizing revenue to the tune of the kind of tax measures that we are seeing we are putting in place? Are we growing revenue-wise as a country in terms of the kind of revenue we are able to mobilize from the taxes? That is the question I would be asking on the table, because when I look at those numbers, KRA managed to collect over and above what they collected last year, 240 billion Kenya shillings.
Correct.
Which, as you've stated, this is an increase of 14%.
Yeah.
And when you look at the measures that were passed last year in the Finance Act 2023, we expected from those measures only, KRA to be able to mobilize around 214 billion Kenya shillings. That means a majority of what they collected as extra revenue over and above what they collected last year was only attributable to the changes or the tax measures that were brought in last year. Again, when you look at the difference between the 240 and 211 or 214, it's around 29. Again, there was also the tax amnesty, which came into play and to really mobilize a lot of revenue with taxpayers being able to declare freely without fines and penalties, which saw KRA being able to collect an extra 43 or 44 billion Kenya shillings. So when I look at those numbers and the way they play, we may say that from a tax-based perspective, we are not growing as a country.
Yep.
The other question on the table is, our industry is growing to the extent where we are able to mobilize more revenue locally, or we are just relying on new tax measures for us to be able to grow more revenue. So the government has a lot of work to do for us to be able to meet our revenue needs if only we are depending on taxes, given that we have sort of exhausted the debt ceiling that we are supposed also to be getting some more money from.
Justinette, allow me to stay with you for a minute with a quick rider there before I come to Seraphine. When you talk about the tax-based expansion, if you look at the release which came from the Revenue Authority, and let me just break down what they said, that through the program, and that's the tax-based expansion program, KRA recruited an additional 1.24 million additional active taxpayers in FY 23-24. If you consider that in our tax register, from the last numbers I saw, we've got about 8 million taxpayers. If you're adding 1.2 million, don't you think that's a strong score?
Definitely, that's a big win for KRA to be able to register more taxpayers. But the question on the table is, are we losing more taxpayers than we are recruiting? Because that can only be what we can attribute to the drop in terms of we are getting more taxpayers on board, but we are not seeing numbers that are commensurate to the growth of the number of taxpayers that we have.
I see. Interesting take there from Josineta from KPMG East Africa. Let me come to Seraphine. What are your thoughts on the performance for the last financial year?
Okay, thank you, Julian. So the press statement was released yesterday by KRA, and immediately on the blogs, what we are seeing is that KRA misses target by around 300 billion. So what we are saying is that it's a high time we acknowledge KRA's commendable performance. Why can't we see the blog saying KRA meets target? Okay, KRA grows revenue by 11.1% and nets 2.4 trillion. I mean, let's give the flowers to KRA. So when it comes to the revenue that was generated, that was collected, biased on indirect taxes. We can see how indirect taxes is performing. For instance, domestic VAT, there was a growth of around 15% on domestic VAT. We can see domestic excise. We can see customs, where they collected around 791 billion. This accounts for around 45% of the total revenue collected, and therefore we can see the important role played by indirect taxes towards revenue generation. Indirect taxes are the silent drivers of this economy, and the government has in the recent past been keen on indirect taxes. And when you come down to customs, which is a bias I have, customs generated 791 billion.
Correct.
They almost hit the 800 billion mark, which is a third of the total revenue that was collected. So we have to recognize the important role that customs plays. Apart from revenue collection, customs plays other roles like safeguarding our borders against prohibited goods, and also trade facilitation and the rest. So by this, we are trying to say there are a number of conditions that customs is working in. This environment is a bit unique compared to other taxes, because if there's any disruption in the global supply chain, it's going to affect customs. And this we saw in the year 2024, 2023-2024, there was a lot of disruptions in the global supply chain, and it affected customs. Nevertheless, customs performed. We can attribute this to technological advancement. We can attribute this to the robust debt collection within customs. Right now, everyone is receiving demands from customs to pay certain debts. We have a robust team in customs that deals with the risk management and the audit, targeted audits. And also, we can say the taxpayer has become compliant. So, and still there's more room for improvement. Customs should look at what they could have done better. For instance, I think customs investing in automation is a big is a game changer for customs. For instance, the blockchain technology, customs can communicate with other revenue authorities when it comes to importation. This will reduce cases of undervaluation, concealment, and tariff misdeclaration. Customs should also tap into the internet space. There's a lot happening in that world, and a lot of transactions taking place that customs can also tap into. And lastly, customs can also invest in integrity, intelligence sharing, basing on the importation that are coming into the country.
I see. Seraphine, let me just go back to your very first point very quickly. I mean, the 2 points are not mutually exclusive. We say that KRA missed their target, and of course they missed, but this was their growth and this was their performance rate, and this is how much they collected. So I don't think we are adverse to the Revenue Authority. We are just stating the facts as they are. Don't you think so?
Okay. Most of the times, like I said in the blogs, you know, the effort that the revenue officers put into collecting these taxes should at least be appreciated. Collecting 2.4 trillion is not is not a big, a small thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially in the present environment.
Exactly.
I want us to drill into the customs conversation. And let me start with Josinetta, because a week or so ago, when we got the Gazette notice from the ESC, and I did my thread on Twitter around the customs measures taking effect on July 1st. And many Kenyans were asking me, we thought these measures collapsed with Finance Bill 24, and many were not clear exactly how ICMA comes into play within the budgetary cycle. Maybe you can begin by explaining to us how that comes in.
Okay, thanks, Julian. To answer your question, I will first explain how the tax measures come into play when it comes to us being East Africa. So the East Africa Customs community is established by the EAC Treaty,
Yeah.
which has several protocols, and several articles that give different organs that assist in functioning of EAC as a whole. And one of the articles is Article 14, which gives the Council of Ministers, and this is the main organ that is basically supposed to be advising and ensuring that as EAC we get the right policies, the right laws in place. And now this is where now the tax changes from an East Africa perspective come into play. So to come to your question, how now the customs changes found themselves gazetted on
June 30th.
On June 30th, whereas as Kenyans we seem like what we had in mind is the finance bill has been done away, is the process usually begins just like the normal local tax changes, which begins by the CS National Treasury requesting the public to make proposals on the different tax measures they would wish to see implemented. So these tax measures may come from different bodies, just like the way we change the VAT, excise duty, miscellaneous fees and levies act. So those proposals are actually given together with all those other local laws. So different organizations, and I'll give an example of KPMG is one of the organization that is usually at the forefront to at least ensure that the laws that are right according to our understanding of the laws that the country should have in place, we come into play and actually give our proposals. From a customs perspective, a majority of them will come from the Kenya Manufacturers Association, who will actually collate different measures from different manufacturers whom they represent. And most of the time, you find that they will also be backed by other professional bodies. All Kenyans have the right to make those proposals. So once those proposals are presented before the National Treasury, then we get a chance as Kenyans actually to go and do explanation to the National Treasury so that they are able to understand where we are coming from, what are the importance of such laws, what are the economic benefits of such laws that we are proposing. So after the analysis, then Treasury usually separates the ones that are affecting the local laws from the ones that are actually now on customs. So the ones for local taxes, we see them now moving forward to the parliament, and we get to participate and debate, and we see a lot of blogs, as Seraphine said, around that. Now the silent ones, as Seraphine has said, the silent drivers, the customs changes now are forwarded to the East Africa community. And there is a whole process, just like the local laws, that those laws actually undergo. So they are forwarded to the EAC Secretariat, where they look at the different laws. They are reviewed by a team of technocrats before they are forwarded to the Sectoral Committee on Trade, Industry, Finance and Investment, who will actually look at them. And these committees or the technocrats that are at the ESC level, they consist of different people from the different member states of ESC. So at that point, I would say all the interests from the different countries are fully represented, because after the STIFI goes through the changes and they find they are okay, then they are forwarded to the Committee of Ministers, which is actually a committee that is composed of the ministers from, or in Kenya we call them the cabinet secretaries. So they meet, they look at the changes, and all the changes must be agreed by all the countries. So after they've been agreed, then the changes that are affecting the import duty rates and the fifth schedule, which is the majorly exemptions, then those ones are approved by that committee. The changes that are touching on ECMA as a whole, or the East Africa Customs Management Act, then they are forwarded to the East Africa Assembly for them to follow the normal law, so that now they can be changed. So at that point, we get majorly the laws that are affecting the import duty rates, and that is where we get what we saw in the current ESC changes. That is the stay of applications, the duty remissions, the changes to the HS codes, let me call them that, or to what we call the East Africa Customs Common External Tariff. So we see all those changes. So by 30th June, as we are finalizing the local laws,
the finance bill,
the customs changes come into play too.
I see. Through
gazettement by the chair, who actually, the position is rotational across East Africa. So currently, the chair is from South Sudan.
South Sudan.
Yes.
Very good in terms of delineating for us how we arrive at the finance bill and also how we arrive now at the customs measures. So let me now come to Seraphine. When you read through the Gazette notice June 30th, what were some of your key points which stood out for you?
Okay, thank you once more, Julian. First of all, the East African Community Gazette notice has brought a number of or significant changes. Number one is to the East African Community Customs Management Act, which is the regulatory framework for the ESC that actually deals with the customs and trade within the East African community. And then we have changes to the East African Community Common External Tariff. So let me take you back to the customs, the CET, the Common External Tariff. As you are aware, Kenya is a member state to the ESC, together with other 7 countries. Someone may be asking, which are these 7 countries? Because we know Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, there's DRC, there's South Sudan, and now there's Somalia.
Correct.
So Kenya, being a member state, is governed by the Common External Tariff, which is a uniform tariff that's supposed to be applied by all the member states when importing goods within the community. So the Common External Tariff is a code that contains names and numbers of anything you can think of below the sky. Because even we have oxygen, and even beyond the earth, the soil, because we have soil, we have minerals. So it contains all those goods. And it also contains corresponding duties. It could be ad valorem, or it could be specific. Ad valorem means on the value, and specific on the units. It could be on the weight or the number of liters, etc. So apart from that, the CET provides for 4 bands of ad valorem taxes. There's the 0 band on raw materials. There's 10% on intermediary goods or semi-processed goods. And then there's 25% on goods which are imported in the community, but they're not readily available within the community. And then there's the 35% on goods which are available in the community. It's sort of a punitive percentage. And then besides that, we have the sensitive goods, which the taxes are more than 35%. Like, for instance, sugar, we have kitenge, we have milk powder. You'll find that these attract higher duty rates. So we've also talked about the specific duty rates. So now what happens if there are changes to this, to the CET? There are so many sectors in the country that are sensitive to these amendments in the tariff rates. For instance, let's say a certain manufacturer who was imposing maybe 10% on some import duty on some products. And then there's an amendment that we are going to impose 0%.
Yeah.
To this manufacturer, it will work for them because now the duty rates on importation have reduced.
Yeah.
So even the cost of production, it will escalate to the final consumer because now the cost of production has reduced. But look at it this way. If you're going to increase the rates of duty of maybe a finished good, it means the importation is going to be expensive. The consumer will fall back to the locally produced goods, and this will promote the domestic industry. However, what if this commodity, if this local manufacturer is not self-sufficient in producing whatever commodity that taxes have been increased? It means, again, we'll have to fall back on the importation, and at this time the duties have increased. Therefore, the consumer is likely to face the effect of the high duties. Yeah. So now going back to my highlights. Okay, just slightly before that, now Kenya as a sovereign state, when the CET provides for certain duty rates, for example, the CET provides for 35%, and then maybe there's an economic situation in the country, let's say, maybe a public health situation, maybe there's an outbreak of a disease. Kenya will go to the EAC and say, look here, we want you to temporarily stop application of this duty, 35%, for a certain period, until we are able to cure the situation in the country. For instance, if there's a disease, there's an outbreak, Kenya will go to the community and say, we need to import medical supplies, we need to import vaccines, we need to import drugs. Therefore, can you defer this application of 35% and let us apply maybe 0%? Yeah. That is what is called the stay of application of the CET rates.
It's normally for 1 year, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for 1 year it can be extended.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me now, the highlights of this East African Community Gazette, it's mostly, I'm looking at what stands out is the intention or the strategic intention of these changes, what the government was trying to achieve by imposing these changes. You know, when it was out, again, the blogs were like, mobile phones, you know, mobile phones, now you'll have to pay 25% on mobile phones. You'll have to pay what percent on televisions. Yes. But for me, what's important is to look at the intention behind that increase or decrease. So for me, I'll talk about mobile phones. Number one, the East African Gazette 2023, the one of 2023, June 2023, stayed the application of import duties. The CT rate was 0. But now for Kenya, it said it was that you stay at the application of 0 and apply 25%. Why was this so? So again, let's not look at it in isolation. Now in Kenya, we have a plant in Athi River that deals with assembly of mobile phones.
Correct.
So I feel the spirit behind this was the government trying to grow this industry by making importation of mobile phones expensive so that the consumer falls back to the locally produced mobile phones. And then this will also create job opportunities. It will lead to the growth of the industry. Another highlight is the remission on inputs that are used to manufacture or assemble these mobile phones. Remission is basically a waiver of all the taxes or partial taxes on certain inputs, intermediary goods or capital goods used to manufacture certain products within the country. When you are granted a duty remission, it means you are going to import at a lower cost. Yeah. And when you import at a lower cost, it means the cost of production will also go down. Yeah. And so what I'm seeing is the government trying to promote these mobile assembly plants, and not only mobile assembly plants, but also laptops and tablets. And also, I can see the government trying to align with the global trend of digitalization and promoting such sectors within the country.
But here's my question very quickly to you, Seraphine, because I mean, granted, I understand there's a protectionist leaning to this kind of proposals, but you're in an environment where the same government is a proponent and party to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which ideally speaks about liberalization of borders, and there should be no barriers, whether tariff or non-tariff. So don't you think we are speaking from both sides of the mouth here?
Okay, now we Kenya, being a member of this regional organization, is supposed to adhere to their framework. And what we are seeing that as much as these organizations aim is to harmonize these tariffs such that if I'm importing in Kenya this pen, I pay 10%, if in Uganda 10%, whichever country. But at the end of the day, the autonomy is reserved in these partner states, where they are allowed to implement measures that are going to be beneficial to their national, the respective partner states' economy. They still reserved, the sovereignty is still reserved to these partner states. And you'll see Kenya trying to tailor-make these fiscal policies to fit its unique economic status. So this is still allowed within this framework.
And maybe on the same tangent now, Justinetta, because you might have seen online, one of the key discussion points around the customs changes was on crude palm oil. Because as she has rightly indicated, we have the bans. And many of us would have expected that crude palm oil, being crude palm oil, the keyword being crude, should be at 0%. But here we are, Kenya, going for a significantly higher rate. How do we reconcile these two?
Okay, thank you, Gillian. As you've rightfully said, Kenya sought to increase the import duty on crude palm oil from actually 0% to 10%. And when we look at the medium-term revenue strategies, we see Kenya was really keen on actually ensuring that the primary inputs, which I believe this is one of the primary inputs that we have in the country in the manufacture of oils and other products like soap, Kenya was aiming at ensuring that such products are actually charged at 0% or they're imported duty-free. And then we have all the other products charged one constant duty rate. So now we've seen a shift on that, where now Kenya is going for a higher import duty rate, which, in my opinion, Kenya is actually trying to protect the local industries. Because when you look at the oil industry, or rather there are so many companies that actually manufacture cooking oil.
Yeah.
I still believe that we still have capability in the country to produce crude oil for making cooking oil and the soaps and the like. When you look at even what the government was envisaging in the Excise Duty Act that was supposed to come through
the finance bill,
there was also a touch on the same. So what the government is saying is, we believe we have the capability as a country to produce our very own oil that is enough to serve Kenyans, domestic market. So I think, it's basically the government trying to protect local industries and also ensuring that we are able to grow them. So I think it's in line with the government's agenda to ensure that we are industrialized.
I see.
Yes.
Seraphine, I'd imagine you share the same sentiment on that one.
Apparently, I am not. I've been looking at the Gazette with a background of what the intention of the government was. We have just talked about the 4-band structure. We have the 0% on raw materials.
Yeah.
We have the 10% on intermediary or semi-processed, and then the 25 and 35. So I'm looking at crude oil. I mean,
crude palm oil, yeah.
Crude palm oil. Why did the government decide to, I mean, what's the meaning of crude? Is it really raw? Or when you talk of crude, it means semi-processed, such that the government has sought approval to place it under 10%. You know, that 10% only symbolizes that it could not...
It is semi-processed.
It is semi-processed. Maybe we are not importing the crude, the very raw.
Yeah.
So I tend to feel that maybe what we're importing is semi-processed, what we are calling crude.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting text there. One of the things which stood out for me is that if you look at a number of items in the Gazette notice, whereas the rest of the region is going for an ad valorem rate, which is a percentage, Kenya has the ad valorem rate and gives a rider of a specific rate. So it will be 35% or USD, whatever, whichever is higher. Why would Kenya opt to go that route when the rest of the region is simply on the percentage rate?
Percentage ad valorem.
Yeah.
I think I'll not go back into explaining what ad valorem and specific is, because Seraphine actually took us through that. So when you look at most of the items, and an example is clothes. Kenya has requested for a stay of application of either 25% or 0.75 US dollars per kg. That means when goods are coming at the border posts, KRA will be looking at the value that is being declared by the importer versus the weight of such clothes. And this is also seen in other items that the specific rate is on either liters or metric tons. So there are several advantages, and I believe these are the measures that KRA is going for. So the specific tax rates, they give certainty to the importers, because, you know, if you bring in clothes that are 50 kgs, then you'll just need to multiply your 50 kgs times 0.5 US dollars per kg, and you get the tax that is due for you. Unlike a situation where you declare the customs value, which is actually the cost of the goods, the insurance and the freight if the goods are coming through the sea. And then once you get at the port of Mombasa, then customs tell you your value, your documents are not adding up. And they end up actually disputing the value that you've declared, and you end up having back and forth in trying to sort the valuation issues, some of which actually end up even in tax tribunal because of those disputes. Because if you import goods that are on ad valorem tax rate, then you're expected to apply the transaction value, which is the primary method of valuation when it comes to goods that are being imported, which is actually the price paid, or that will be paid later by the importer. So at times, because of different economic levels that we are operating at, if I'm importing the goods as a retailer, if I go and approach a company in China, I'll be given a higher price than you who is importing, let's say, 20 containers in a month. So you find the prices could vary based on the economic level at which the importer is operating. So at times you find different clients being compared, because actually KRA has ways of getting data and comparing different data for different importers of goods that are coming from the same manufacturer, the same country. So you find that when you're bringing goods that are subject to ad valorem tax rate, you're really not certain whether you'll really get your goods out because of those issues of valuation. Again, specific duty rates are easy to administer for the government because there will be no back and forth. And because I know I'm carrying 10 kgs, the government will just collect that X and I move. So the government, in that way, it's easy to collect, it's facilitating trade, and goods are able to move very fast. So some of those advantages, I believe, are the ones that are driving the Kenyan government to seek to use the specific duty rates. Again, the government has been insisting and is keen on ensuring that it's transparent. So if the taxes are known with certainty, then the government is also perceived by the Kenyans that it's transparent. And those are some of the measures, rather some of the benefits that the government is trying to achieve through having these specific duty rates.
So ease of administration and predictability and certainty.
Exactly.
Seraphine, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, maybe I could just add on what Josnet has told us. I'm looking at it as the government trying to position itself on certain, or cushioning itself on certain aspects like price volatility. There has been a lot of fluctuation in the prices of commodities, and you see if prices of commodities decrease, it means even the government is levying ad valorem taxes, it means also the taxes will decrease. But if we have a specific rate in place, then regardless of the value of the goods, the government is going to use the specific rate as a hedge. Yes, and that they're going to collect the maximum possible revenue. And then also it could be a way of protecting the domestic industry. For instance, if the prices of commodities, the global prices have reduced, and you're bringing in goods and taxing at that reduced rate, it means there's a possibility that the prices of the local produced goods is likely to be undercut by these reduced prices. So I'm seeing it as a way of the government trying to protect these local producers. And then also, as Josnet has put it, administering specific duties is much easier. Let me bring you to perspective, but I'm going to use exports. When you are exporting raw hides and skins, you know, the small exporters, they'll collect the raw hides and skins from farmers within a certain period of time. And once they can fill a container, let's say a 20-foot container, then they're going to export it. And the export duty rate is also both a combination of ad valorem and specific. For instance, I think right now it's around, okay, let's say, is it 80, okay, yes, the Finance Act 2023, it reduced from 80% ad valorem. I think it's now 50, and then it also has specific. So what you'll see traders doing, because they know the value of these raw hides and skins they have collected from the farmer is very minimal.
Yeah.
But the weight, a 20-foot container, which the weight is around 23 tons. So you'll find that most of these traders are going to misdeclare the weight because it is whichever is higher.
Yes.
So if you are able to detect that there's a misdeclaration on the weight, then it's very easy to administer this specific rate. You just go and weigh the container.
Weight,
yeah. So administration and curbing malpractices of misdeclaration is likely to be avoided by administering both these rates. And then there's the issue of fluctuation, inflation and currency fluctuation.
Yes.
This is also going to be deterred by imposing both the dual tariff structure. There's dumping. Dumping where maybe an exporter and exporting countries exports goods into Kenya at a price that is lower than even the cost of production in their own country. Or maybe they export to Kenya at a price that is lower than what they are selling in their own country. So if you administer specific, then the issue of dumping will not be existing.
All right. That point by Seraphine takes us to a very quick break. Remember, we are unpacking the customs measures which took effect on the 1st of July of 2024. That is courtesy of the Gazette notice we got from the East African community. When we come back from the break, the point she has touched on in terms of the FX impact, we'll be drilling more into that, as well as the question I'm seeing online coming from majority of you. We had so much talk last year about deconsolidation. How has that reflected, if in any way, in the latest numbers? We shall be touching on that. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this conversation on Business to Define, the last leg of our conversation. We began by looking at the revenue outturn for FY 23-24. We drilled down into the conversation of customs, and that, of course, is following the Gazette notice which you saw from the East African community in terms of the measures which took effect on July 1st. I've got a couple of questions coming in online. The first one, so many questions on cargo deconsolidation. We had so much talk about it last year. Just to begin with, what is cargo deconsolidation and why was it so important in FY 23-24? I don't know who goes for it.
Okay, I can take that, Julians. And I think the beginning point is to tell, or rather to explain, how does this deconsolidation come about?
Yeah.
So usually what happens is, and this has actually been brought about by e-commerce, because now Kenyans are able to log online and you're able to buy your 2 shirts from China, you're able to buy your 2 belts of clothes that you want to come and sell in Kenya, you're able to buy your few pairs of shoes. So small traders are able actually to log in online and you're able to buy goods. So what happens is those different importers who are not able to bring goods, maybe a full container load, or even afford, or rather even understand how to go about shipping the goods via air. So you find there are facilitators, let me call them facilitators, who are actually businessmen. You find they are either based in China or Turkey. I believe those are the major places where those small business men and women actually get to buy their goods from. So those men and women are known as consolidators. So I buy my 5 shirts, I take the 5 shirts to that consolidator. If you buy your 10 shoes, you take them to them. Seraphine buys 50 phones, they still take the 50 funds to that person to be able to ship the goods to this person. So you find at the end of the day, the consolidator has a full container load of goods that are belonging to different individuals. Yes. So those goods are actually manifested, or when they are being shipped into the country, they will be manifested under this one consolidator as though they belong to that other one person. So initially or previously what used to happen is those goods actually used to come in, and this one person would charge the shipping cost together with the taxes, and then they are able to pay for the taxes for the full container load.
Yeah.
So come last year, KRA was keen on understanding or getting to deconsolidate these consignments to the different owners. And that is where now the term deconsolidation came from.
Yeah.
So KRA was keen on ensuring that if the goods are belonging to Josineta, I as Josineta am a taxpayer, and I should be able to pay my own taxes. And this is also based on the rules of valuation when it comes to importation of goods. So when the goods arrive in the country, KRA expects the container to be stripped and the different goods to be actually manifested to the different owners, and then the different owners actually declare their own consignment and pay the taxes. Why KRA was keen on this from my perspective was because most of the time you find the consolidator will not charge you the rightful taxes, because when you look at the practice is that they charge maybe $11 or $12 per kg if the goods are coming through the air. If they are coming through the sea, then they charge per CBM or cubic meter. So that way KRA, I believe, was losing a lot because the right value of these goods were not being declared. So you find I'm bringing more expensive suits, I may pay the same value as somebody who is bringing suits that are of lower value. If I'm selling suits, maybe when I'm selling the suit down the streets of Koinange, I'll be selling that suit maybe at maybe 50,000. I'll be charged the same tax as somebody who is selling their suits at 5,000. And this also implies where I go the goods, the value is still high. So KRA was losing a lot, and the consolidation actually also brings about equity in terms of taxation, because every taxpayer should be paying their fair share of it. So if you're importing goods, you should be ready to pay the taxes that are due from those goods and not undercut the government. And again, you're still selling to Kenyans at still
steep prices.
Yes. So it came in to address actually the rules of valuation, because the rules of valuation dictate that if you're importing goods, you should be able to pay taxes based on what is known as the transaction value, which is the price that is payable or that you've already paid for those goods. And that is the primary method of valuation before we move to the rest, which I believe is what was being applied back then. So it's basically aligning to what ECMA dictates in terms of valuation, and also the guidelines by WTO and WCO when it comes to valuation.
All right.
Yes.
So it was addressing the issues of under declaration, if I could call it.
Yeah, under declaration in terms of quantities and under declaration in terms of value.
I see.
Yes.
Fantastic point there. Unfortunately, we don't have a granulated perspective from KRA in terms of how deconsolidation impacted the customs numbers. I know that was the second question, but we can't answer it because we don't have the numbers. So many questions coming in terms of last year was very volatile on the foreign exchange front. How did that affect customs numbers? Seraphine.
Okay, thank you once more, Julian. Let's say supposing I was importing this pen today, and the cost of this pen is 10 shillings, or let's say 10 US dollars. And at the time it gets into the country, the exchange rate is 132 on the dollar. So when KRA is calculating the customs value for purposes of levying the taxes, there'll be a conversion. The rate applicable is the rate that is provided by the central bank of the partner states. So if I'm calculating the taxes on 10 USD at the exchange rate of 132, that is 1,320, and then I calculate the taxes on the pen. But supposing I brought the same pen when the dollar rate was 160, and I'm calculating again the taxes on 160 times 10. Of course, the revenue, the taxes I'll pay will be more, depending on the dollar rate. And that's how Forex affects duties collected under global trade.
I see.
Yeah.
Very good perspective there with very spot-on examples. Help me answer this question around the duty we have seen on rice, which for Kenya is a little lower than the rest of the region. And there's some interest in that space.
Okay. If I look at the duty rates for rice, currently there's a stay of the CT rates. The CT rates provides for 75%, or 345 USD per metric ton. But this was stayed for Kenya, and currently Kenya is applying 35%, or 200 USD per metric ton. This also again is an extension of what was in the Gazette of last year. So we all know rice is a sensitive good.
What do you mean by sensitive good?
Okay, as I was explaining, when you look at the common external tariff, it has a list of goods which the four-band structure, 0, 10, 25, and 35. And then we have another list of goods which are said to be sensitive. Example of goods which fall in this list include rice, it includes wheat, it includes sugar, it includes textile, kitenge, it includes, have I said sugar?
Yes, yes.
So if you look at most of these commodities, as we had said before, the government has, the government has specific interest, national interest, that it seeks to protect and not apply the CT rates. For instance, let's say sugar, maybe the government is trying to protect the local industries, sugar industries. Therefore, the government will impose high taxes on importation of sugar to make it expensive to import. Look at kitenge, the Kikomis, the Rivertex. The government was trying to protect these local producers of this fabric, and therefore these industries played a very critical role in the economy of Kenya. So to protect them, the government increased the taxes of imported kitenge. And because this textile is at the heart of the government, the taxes imposed on kitenge are more than 35%. And now this makes it a sensitive good. We have milk, we have milk powder, agriculture, trying to promote agriculture, milk production. So it imposes more duty on imported milk powder to deter such importation, so that we consume and also promote the producers, the local farmers.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the list of sensitive goods.
Thank you for that. Josinetta helped me respond to this question. This guy is saying, hello, Julians. Is it correct that the 25% duty on mobile phones came in the 22-23 ESC Gazette, or is it coming in the recently published Gazette?
Okay, thank you, Julians. And I think that's, I don't know to say, a very straightforward answer that I will take a minute, because the changes in terms of import duty rates for mobile phones were introduced in the Finance Act, in the ESC Gazette for 2023, or the one that came into force on 30th June 2023. So this year, it's just an extension. As we had earlier alluded, the stay of application, the duty remissions, they are usually valid for 1 year. So if a country wishes for that rate to continue being applied, then they have to go back to EAC and seek an extension of the same, of course, giving a background of why they still require to continue applying either a higher rate or a lower rate than the CET rate.
Yes.
And if you look at even the duty remissions that were introduced last year in regards to mobile phones, the country is keen on ensuring that we are able to produce our very own. And this is one area where I think we should allude the government, because it's telling us not to import and at the same time giving incentives for us to be able to produce the same locally.
There's a question here, and I asked you this question earlier, I think before we came here, and the question is, Justinetta mentioned that these customs measures were subjected to public participation. Is that actually the case?
Yes, Julian. I would say Kenyans have an opportunity to make their presentations. And as I said at the beginning, the cycle actually follows the normal cycle on tax measures changes, which begins, I think, around September.
Yeah.
And the CS invites the public to do proposals. So at that point, as Kenyans, we are in a position to make presentations of the proposals that we would wish to see incorporated, either from a customs perspective or the local taxes like VAT and excise duty. So there is a bit of public participation. The only bit that is missing is by the time we are doing, or we are going to Parliament, where a majority of us think that is the public participation. At that point, the changes have already been forwarded to the East Africa for further deliberation and actually approval by the Council of Ministers at the EAC. So yes, we have a chance, though it may not be elaborate as the Finance Act.
Honestly, on the finance bill,
yes, exactly.
Interesting point there. My director is telling me we have 6 minutes to go, so let me give each of you 3 minutes to give your closing thoughts. Let me start with Seraphine.
Okay, mine is again on the EAC Gazette. The EAC Gazette has brought about some transformative changes. We should not look at these changes in isolation without trying to consider the intention of bringing in about these changes. And these changes are very key towards streamlining the cross-border trade. These changes are key in promoting the regional integration, that's the EAC, and eventually these changes are also going to affect businesses. They're going to affect the regional, the EAC region, and ultimately also affect the citizen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Justinetta, your closing thoughts on this subject.
Okay, thank you. As Seraphine said when we started, customs is part of the indirect taxes, which is actually a consumption tax. So whenever there is an increase, it affects the final consumer of the goods. Again, it also affects the importers, the manufacturers who are dealing with such taxes, and to be specific on customs. So as Kenyans, we really need to be keen on the changes that are coming, because we are expected to plan.
Yeah.
Because the moment you don't stay abreast the changes that are coming, then you'll be caught by surprise. And I believe our costs in terms of extra tax to an importer, to a manufacturer, is always very painful. And by the time you adjust your prices so that you can transfer the same costs to your consumer, then maybe by that time you'll have lost some clients, some goods you've sold at a loss. So it's always very important for us to stay abreast the changes that are coming. Yeah. And again, as I said, as Kenyans, we have a chance to change these tax laws. So whichever tax proposals that you have that are affecting the customs duty, as you make your proposals that are supposed to be going through the finance bill and eventually through the Finance Act, please ensure that you include the customs changes.
Many thanks, Justinetta, for your thoughts from KPMG East Africa. Many thanks, Seraphine from EY. Asante Sana. Ladies and gentlemen, that draws us to the close of our conversation tonight on Business Redefined. We began by focusing on the tax revenue outturn for FY 23-24, which drew to a close on June 30th. Then we navigated to drill down into matters regarding customs, and that has been the subject of our conversation following the Gazette notice which came from the East African Community on the Common External Tariffs, effective July 1st, 2024. Covered a couple of them. We couldn't cover everything as always, but in case you have any further questions, please shoot them my way at MbokoJH on Twitter. We shall be able to respond. Stay tuned. Up next is the news with James Smart.